Hi, and welcome to the Green Beret Way podcast. I'm Robert Schaefer, and for more than 30 years, I served as a Green Beret, U.S. diplomat, leadership mentor, and entrepreneur, operating environments where the word impossible was simply a baseline for the mission. We created this podcast with one specific mission, and that's to show you how to achieve the impossible routinely. Who's this podcast for? It's for leaders, whether you're in business, government, or the military, but it's also for moms and dads leading their kids through life. It's for leaders who are educators and counselors. It's for the clergy, the politicians, the everyday person setting the example for anybody else, or just wanting to lead themselves to maximize their own potential. So whether it's in your personal life, being a leader within your family, for yourself personally, being a leader in your own space, a coach, teacher, counselor, business leader, we are here to help you move beyond being a manager and to become an epic leader. And that's an empathetic, purposeful, inspirational, and character-driven leader. Someone who creates extraordinary teams that deliver extraordinary results. But to get to that level of performance, we have to deal with the primary obstacle that stops most people in their tracks. We have to deal with the biology of fear. And throughout these podcasts, we'll talk a lot about that and the research that I've done on it. And the fear that makes us yell when we should speak, from the fear of being successful, of not being successful, to the fear sometimes of being successful, or the fear of not being liked, from the fear of being hurt to all of the other, what we call just maladaptive responses to the kind of everyday fears that we have in our work environments. So each week, we're going to talk to practitioners who have moved past theory and actually delivered in zero-fail environments. And there's no better way to start that conversation with the events than we've seen over the past few weeks. If we look back at the 3 attempts on the life of the president, we see a sequence of events that would paralyze the vast majority of people. Now, love him or hate him, there's a biological fact here that's worth analyzing. President Trump did not allow these events to affect his psyche or the psyche of those around him. And that's pretty profound. So whether or not we like the president, there's a lesson in the mechanics of this and how we can apply it to our own lives. Most leaders are susceptible to fear contagion. What's that? It's when a high intensity threat hits. And if it's on the battlefield, it's a bullet, but in the office, it's the threat of being fired or demoted, or a threat to your family or personal relationships. When that happens, the amygdala in your brain reacts the same way. This is a scientific fact. Like this is, most people don't realize this, but this is Nobel Prize winning research that says that the physiological effect on your body, the way you react, is exactly the same when you are being threatened to be fired as it is when you have a lion going to attack you. Your body reacts exactly the same. And so we realize that most of the problems with leadership, almost 97.5% of them, I know this because I've done all the research, is a maladaptive fear response to something that's going on. And so if you haven't mastered your own kind of fear, then you're going to be the one keeping your team from achieving extraordinary results. And that's why I've invited Nick Ripplinger to our show today. So Nick is a longtime friend, an Army veteran who conducted personnel protection details in the past and is now the CEO of Battlesite Technology. He understands that whether you're guarding a dignitary, trying to get a multi-million-dollar deal done in a boardroom, or coaching your kid how to deal with bullies, the biology is the same, and the requirement for a leader to manage their own signal is paramount. So Nick, welcome, and thanks for being my very first guest on the Green Beret Way podcast.
Thanks, Rob. Truly an honor to be here.
So I think we've heard about all these assassination attempts, and you used to do personal protection missions. So can you tell me a little bit about like what that entails, and what are the types of things that most people don't think about when you're doing that kind of work?
Yeah, I think the thing that people don't see, right? You see the bodyguards next to, the president or a COCOM or, any high level dignitary. And that's what, like, that photo of Reagan always stands out to me, right? All those guys in suits and then all of a sudden they had guns. Like, that's one layer. But what I think you don't see is all the preparation that goes into every single one of these trips. There's agents out there running advanced work, coordinating with the local hospitals, coordinating with local law enforcement, coordinating, in my case, I worked for NATO, so we were always coordinating with, foreign countries. And it might go weeks leading up to that, 2 hour meeting that you get a couple glimpses of on the news at night.
And then what about, did you ever have a situation where you had to like react, whether it was a real threat or not? And then what goes through everybody's mind when that happens?
Yeah, I think, like, full disclosure, like, not a Green Beret, so don't want to get any of that confused with the title of this. But, I've had the privilege of working with a lot of Green Berets and having some Green Berets as friends, such as yourself. And I think the thing that we all always come back to is in those threat type, high stress environments, you revert back to your training, right? There's not a whole lot of thinking that goes on in those reactionary situations, because you've put in all the, countless hours, countless weeks, months of your life, years of your life, to lead up to be successful in those situations. So whether, it was a training event or real life event or just some, jerk throwing rocks at us, right? We're all going to respond, and we know how our buddies to the left and right of us are going to respond, because we have all those shared experiences and all those shared training exercises that there's not really time to think in those environments. You just have to react and do your job.
Yeah, and you don't. What I hear you saying is that the fear doesn't affect you because you have literally trained it out of you.
Yeah, I think there's always that fear there, right? But you don't have time to let that fear, have an impact on your decision, right? You just have to go out and execute. And, here at our shop, in our kitchen, and we actually put this on the back of t-shirts because we got so much good feedback on it. A phrase that we live by here is violently execute. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to be scared or afraid going into, whatever situation it is. It just means that you're going to show up in that situation, execute, and then deal with it later.
Yeah, and that's a famous Patton quote about, a good plan executed violently today is better than a perfect plan executed next week. So I guess that's also kind of telling everybody to, hey, let's do it today.
That's exactly, and it's a total twist on Patton, probably more of a ripoff than anything of Patton, but it's true, right? I'd rather make a mistake today because we took action than wait a week and have a perfect plan and ended up with that same result. Like, we talk about getting to fail fast here, right? Failing is not the end of the world, and we fail here every single day, but it's not failure. I think that's a big, I don't know, I'm not an English guy whatsoever, but it's how it was explained to me, and it really resonated. Is failure only happens when you stop, right? You fail today, dust yourself off, try something new tomorrow until you get to that success. It's only truly failure when you don't show up the next day or the next hour or the next minute, depending on the environment.
Yep. It's only failure when you stop. So that's great. So let's talk a little bit about Battle Sight. You talked about the shirts there. So what happened? What was the friction point? What was the reason, the idea that caused you to create Battle Sight? Was there a specific gap between what existed and what you saw that needed? How did it come about?
Yeah, so there's two ways. Like, one, I never set out to be an entrepreneur. Total happenstance by accident. But our first product, the Craytac, is an infrared crayon. So you write on any hard surface, it lights up like an IR chem light, lasts about 6 hours, and then fades away. When we're like during our time with, the GWAT era veterans, right, we were burning through millions of IR chem lights, and they're static 6-inch pieces of plastic. So whether you're clearing a building or whether you were, doing convoys or whether you were doing whatever, there's always chem lights everywhere. But there's no standardization across the force of what does one chem light mean? What does two chem lights mean? I was like, there's got to be a better way to be able to communicate. And we have the technology, we have this light that only our guys can see with night vision goggles. Why don't we turn that into a writing appliance? So it was really just like, I would have been a customer for this product back when I was in the military. Kind of seemed like a natural fit to, take that torch and run with it.
It's also better for the environment too, right? You're not leaving around all that trash. Like when units go and they do when they do training events, right? And they're out in the woods or whatever, all that stuff gets left behind. Nobody picks it up. So you don't have to worry about that.
And it was weird, like in Iraq, we were paying local nationals to bring us American trash and paying them. So it's a huge economic saver. To your point, the environment, and then really just the time, and then being able to effectively communicate in those very stressful, situations. When bullets are flying over your head, you don't want to try to remember what does two chem lights mean tonight, right? You just draw an arrow. Hey, it means go this way, or it's cleared, or there's some sort of obstacle or IED or whatever it might be.
So, when you first got out of the military, what was a fear that you experienced that nobody had warned you about? Like the one stuff that they didn't talk about, those transition briefings that we used to have that were essentially like worthless. Like what fears did you have getting out that might have stopped you from starting this business in the first place?
Yeah, so when I got out of the military, I was TDY all the time. I banked a little bit of money. So I had this beautiful plan. I was going to take a year off, go back to school, and like figure out what the hell I want to do with my life now that I'm like a real adult now. And like thought it was a perfect plan. I was home for like 3 weeks, and my wife at the time told me she was pregnant. So I think like my biggest fear or stressor during that time wasn't so much getting out of the military. It was getting out of the military, having this plan just to go be a student for a year, and then having the whole parenthood thing dropped on me, and not really knowing the answers to any of three of those questions led to a lot of like chaos in my personal life. So I did what everybody else here in Dayton, Ohio does. That's a transitioning vet, and went and took a job at the base and like just tried to figure life out for a while.
Yeah, but it's a huge jump from that to then starting your own business, man. That's like, you know, guys, some of the guys that I started in the distillery with. So when I got out, well, we went through the first Gulf War together, and then we used to hang out, and then he got out and started working for his father-in-law's insurance business. And we kind of lived vicariously through each other for a while because, he's in this big, huge, multi-million dollar house, and he's got all the great cars and all this cool stuff, right? But he's still, living through me in terms of like all the exciting stuff that we're doing in special forces. But I used to say, I still think I kind of believe this, right? Is that I used to say that what we did in special forces wasn't nearly as frightening as it would be for someone to go out and just start their own business, because like there's so many unknowns. And when you're in the military, it's all very prescribed for you. You know that if you do this and you do it well, then you can get to the next rank, you go to another school. Like there's a whole, like your career can pretty much be planned out from day one, if you decide not to do that. But when you decide to start your own business, man, that's frightening. And I literally used to say that all the time. And I think I still believe it. So how did you get from taking that nice, safe job on the base to then making that jump? How'd you get over that fear?
Yeah, so I left the base. I went out and I did spend some time, I don't know, like 3 years maybe, in private sector industry. And that's really where I learned like the ins and outs of stuff. Not that like I'm such a believer that like school's important, but it's not the end all be all. So like I have an MBA that didn't teach me how to start a business or how to run a business. It taught me how to make like pretty PowerPoints and presentations and spreadsheets. And then I spent some time in industry and learned a little bit that's might be a little more tactical, like business wise. But I really think the fear was like once you make that decision, you just have to lower your head and run through every brick wall. And you have to know that there's going to be brick walls behind the next brick wall that you weren't even tracking or aware of. And not that I recommend doing this by any means, but I had a little too much bourbon one night and I burnt all my suits. I'm like, if I'm doing this, I'm going to be authentically, I'm right. I'm going to wear jeans and a ball cap and t-shirts. It's cold here. That's why I have a hoodie on today. But, we've been to so many events together around the world, and it takes a lot for me to pull out the one suit that I have since bought since then. But literally, I sat out there, burnt the ships, if you would, which was all my suits. It's like, I'm not going to let this fail. I don't care how many times we get kicked in the nuts or how many problems we run into. This is going to work. And I think it was really a mind shift or a mindset thing more than anything. It's like, no, we're doing this. I feel like that's how you had to feel while going on some of these high risk missions you did, right? Like We might lose some people, people might get injured, but at the end of the day, we're going to accomplish the objective.
Yeah, you just and that's kind of the way I do everything now as well too. It's the yes, your mind might be telling you that it's dumb, and other people might be telling you that you're dumb, and the potential for you to fail is high, and it just doesn't matter. We're doing it anyways, and you just
Yeah, I mean, statistically, it's not a good idea to start a business,
no,
like
it's
at
not.
all. But I mean, I think if you're wired that way and you have that risk tolerance, those are all important. But it's really that never fail mentality that you have to have if you're going to, chart a course on.
Yeah. And I love the burning the suits part. I didn't know that part, but what I will say for anybody who's listening to this, right?
Ex-wife
So
about that.
Nick goes to all of his huge multi-million billion-dollar deals, walking in with like four-star generals, and Nick just doesn't give up about it, and he wears his t-shirt and his ball cap, and all these big wigs are thinking like, who the hell is this dude? And then he starts pulling out the stuff and showing them what he can do, and then they all shut up and they start calling. I mean, they don't call you daddy, but they kind of internally start calling you daddy, right? So
Sometimes it backfires. Like full disclosure, that suits still really mean a lot to some people, but it's. I think you got to be authentically yourself, though. Like if you were trying to do any business that you're not an expert in, or that you don't have that credibility, or you can't walk into that room and just say, here it is, guys, take it or leave it, I don't think you're going to be successful. And I think we see a lot of that out there of like, it might be a great business model and great, idea of whatever it is. But if your founder team and your team doesn't have that expertise and that credibility in the space, I think that's where a lot of companies fail.
So I see the book on the back shelf next to a very nice looking bottle of bourbon. So walk us through how you decided to write your book, Frontline Leadership. What was the problem that you were trying to solve for the reader?
Yeah, so that whole book was purely written out of frustration. It was the second to last gig I had out in the private sector before I went out and started Battle Site. I was working for a great organization. They've been sold. They're now part of a multi-bazillion dollar company. Great products, serve the war fighter. It's really where I fell in love with manufacturing and like creating physical products. But I worked for a dude who I could not stand, and he could equally not stand me either. And so that caused so much friction, and so much, I'll just call it animosity really, that we weren't making the best decisions because I was never going to agree with him. He was never going to agree with me. And I mean, there's a whole lot of other stuff to that, but it led to the frustration. So I was sitting out in the barn one day, flipping through some old military journals, and I found really that, in those situations and throughout my business career, I've referenced more of my military career than I have, going to different like higher ed schools or trainings or anything like that. It was the day-to-day tactical stuff that happened in the military that really turned me into the professional that I am today, more so than any of that formal education. So each chapter is kind of broken down into two parts. Try to tell a quick, funny story from the military and how that lesson is like stuck with me throughout my career climbing that corporate ladder at the time. This is long before Battle Site was even an idea, but it was really just simple traits to help, whether you're a 30-year Green Beret or whether you're a 4-year personnel clerk. We can all relate to these stories because we all had similar things happen to us or to a friend or somebody like that. All stories that military people can relate to, and then how I've used like those silly, stupid stories to actually propel my professional life.
Yeah, and I don't know if I did it purposefully or just unconsciously, but my book is kind of set up the same way. Instead of just a vignette, the vignette is more about specifically the training, but that's a really great way to set up. So,
But
and
here's the
how,
difference between your book and mine is yours was actually thought out and like planned and executed perfectly. Mine is just some pissed off, mid-20s kind of burnout professional writing. So
yeah, but you made the bestseller list there on Amazon. So, don't know how long that was, but a bestseller is a bestseller, man.
yeah, it lasted a couple weeks. I always joke I get to make hundreds of dollars off the book a year.
Well, and you at least had a chance to write down your thoughts on leadership. So hopefully you're making that a requirement for everybody who works at the company to read.
Nah, well, I don't, believe it or not. But really, like now, I think the book's been out like 10 years or something. Now I really look at it as like, I'm not going to live forever. I have two young boys, and hopefully one day when I'm gone, they pull this out and like, oh shit, maybe dad knew what he was talking about.
Yeah, I think about the same thing with my own kids. Is that a lot of the stories that are in the book are things that you're not gonna sit down and say, hey Nicholas, come over here and let me tell you about the time I really fucked up land nav. You're just not gonna do that. So the book is good for that stuff. So okay, so before we dive into the rest of the conversation with Nick, do me a favor. If you're finding this useful, hit the subscribe button now and share this episode with one other leader that you know. That's how we're going to grow this community and help more people achieve the impossible routinely. Okay, so Nick, your book warns against using fear as a leadership tool. So describe what you watched happen to a specific type of leader who was running their team through fear. What did it look like, or in your case, what did it feel like, and what did it cost the team?
Yeah, I think when you sit there and have to tell people you're in charge, you've already lost control of that situation. You're no longer leading, right? You're just being a manager of whatever task, and the guys are going to do it because they believe in the mission, but they're going to do it out of spite because they don't believe in you as a leader. And I was super fortunate. I got to serve under some of the best leaders in the world, and early on in my career, I think I had some of the worst leaders in the world, but
And I think those actually teach us the biggest lessons. I mean, you said that you wrote your book because you were dealing with a bad leader. So, yeah, I think the most of the best lessons in my book as well also come from the worst leaders. But please go on.
yeah, I think we take those good leaders for granted, right? When
Hmm.
they're leading effectively and you believe in them and you believe in the mission, like you don't sit back and think about their leadership style or why is this working, right? It's just working, so you just keep moving forward. Where when you have that bad toxic leadership, you're now analyzing why it's not working and the cause and effect of their actions, behaviors, language, whatever it is that's causing that situation. I think that's why we learn so much more from those shitty leaders, and I'm truly thankful for all of them I've encountered across my career so far. Sorry, I totally forgot the question.
No, it was just like when you wrote about that, it not using fear as a leadership tool in the book. So I'm just you already described like what you saw, like when that kind of leader did things, or what it felt like to be on that team, or literally like what did it cost the team when you had somebody who led through fear.
Yeah, and I think it's impossible to calculate what it costs, but it's definitely massive because people aren't going above and beyond in that situation. They're not leaning in, they're not taking it, a step further. They're doing the bare minimum and just trying to get, back to their family or back to their hut or back to wherever they can remove themselves from that situation. So I do think you get results with that fear base, but it's the bare minimum results. Where I think if you lead authentically and you put your people first, or I guess really second, right? Mission's always first, then your people, and you have this purpose built organization, everybody's going to try to take it that extra step, that extra mile, that extra whatever. And that's really where you see that real growth and mission success, whatever that mission is.
So now let's talk about the extraordinary standard or the impossible standard, because um, you've done some things with Battle Site that other people would have said is impossible, right? Because nobody done it before. And when they haven't done something before, they tend to think things are impossible. So now you've led teams in environments where average was not an option, like doing personal protection. So how do you translate that kind of extraordinary standard into a civilian tech company like Battlesite without the team feeling like they're in a combat zone or they're working for the sergeant major?
Yeah, so great question. And I really think so we hire a lot of veterans here at Battle Site and we hire a lot out of the special operations community because I think they inherently have that mindset, right? We don't have to train, we don't have to coach, we don't have to do that. However, I think the number one rock star in our organization right now has zero military experience, but she is so bought into that mission that we do take on impossible tasks, right? We have, I don't know, 15 patents or something like that issued, where it's stuff that's never been done before. Some of it's simple stuff like that's just never been thought of. Some of the stuff is like we had to push the boundaries of physics or manufacturing or the light spectrum, whatever it might be, to achieve that type of capability. But I think there's people wired that way that thrive in those conditions, and that's what we're always looking for. I always like to say I'm the dumbest person at battle site because it's not me out there building these things or pushing the boundaries of physics to solve these problems. It's everybody else. But I also feel like they're supportive enough that, hey, we're gonna go try something, and if it works, great, we'll move on, and if it doesn't, we're gonna go back to the drawing board. I think it was Edison that said like he found 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb.
Right.
Like that's just the joy of inventing stuff. Like if it was easy and it worked the first time, everybody would be doing it. But if something's got to withstand, as we make military products, if it's got to withstand being thrown against the wall, like I don't want you to CAD and simulate it. Go throw it against the wall. Did it break? If it did, we'll rebuild it. And if it didn't, then we probably know we're onto something and let's keep moving forward.
So what are some of the things that you've made recently that hadn't been done before? I mean, I for listeners, viewers, right? I always like to talk about Nick's who he had the most impossible like business model to begin with, because he literally found stuff that the government wanted but nobody was making and nobody knew what to do, and then he bought the patents for it for like a pittance, and then he got the government to pay for him to make the stuff that they'd already identified a need for. I mean, it was just brilliant. So, and since then, besides the original stick that you had, you've created some other things that never existed before. So, what are some of those things
Yeah,
that you can
so
talk about?
yeah, and by design, everything we do is on the low side, thank God. But you remember those old black and white glint tape flags that reflect back IR light? So we found a way. Those like star stickers that kids put on their ceilings. So you go tuck in your kid, you turn off the lights, and then their ceiling's glowing for a few hours. So we found a way to do that in infrared, and we do those in shoulder patches, unit patches, skill identifier tabs, whatever, fully customizable. But a few hours isn't going to get you through a full night when you're on a mission. So, the team found a way to tweak the chemistry and get a full night cycle out of, 5-10 minute charge of sunlight on these things for friend foe identification. I actually just packaged up a shipment of that this morning going out to the Navy. But I think the thing
So let's talk about how extraordinary that is, right? You got some nice watches, all right? I got some nice watches. Even the nicest, most expensive watches that we have, the lume on those things don't last very long at all. So what is it that you did that Rolex hasn't figured out yet?
So one, we're in the near IR spectrum, which gives us a little bit of advantage over the naked eye because you're using image intensifiers and tubes and stuff like that. So like it wasn't 100% on us. Some of the supporting technology helps as well. But really it was an 18-month process of refiring all these rare earth elements, at 1,500 degrees Celsius until we figured it out. And you think of, right, we put 10 rare earth elements in there. They all have different melting points and all these just different levers, because there's no book out there that says if you do A, B, and C, you'll get the result you want. And there's just a shit ton of tests to kind of get us to that product. And then, we made this super fine powder, but now what do you do with it? So you have the whole other development cycle of what paints are we going to put this in, what epoxies are we going to put this in, what films are we going to put this in, what resins are we going to put this in? How do you actually take that core technology and then productize it in a way that's beneficial to the warfighter?
Yeah. So it sounds like you got to have all kinds of people. It sounds like you got to have like some scientists, and you got to have some other stuff, and you're recruiting for a team that, well, it's very non-standard. I'm not sure anybody else has got a team like you, right? And it's got to perform at a level that is higher than most. So when you're looking to recruit for the team, what's the most important behavior you look for? Is it a technical skill, specific psychological makeup? Like, what are you really looking for the most?
So fortunately, we've grown and the team does a way better job of hiring than I do personally. My only real criteria for hiring is like, can I spend 8 to 10 hours a day with you and not want to punch you in the face? And I'm sure HR would, if they ever listen to this, they're going to be cringy, but that's really like my criteria. And so I was having drinks.
Well, the way to say it that HR likes is that you look for whether or not they will fit into the culture, right?
That's exactly where I was going with this. So I was sitting down and having drinks with our COO, who Yeah, we were making, a hire recently, and like the number one thing, the only thing that really matters to me is culture fit, right? If you have an engineering degree, I assume that you know some engineering stuff, and we can teach you kind of what we call the battle site way, not to, rip off the Green Beret way, but there's definitely a certain way we conduct business and conduct research and conduct everything we do inside these four walls here at battle site. Like if you have the mindset and you're a driven person, if you're bought into the mission that we're doing here, some of those like tactical skills, right? We can send you to a CAD class if you need to brushing up on that, or we can, buy a software or buy a piece of technology out in the lab to round that out. Is really the right person. I think, I don't think any other kind of special operations organization does it as well as the Green Berets. I don't know how long selection is now, but it is that long-term interview to see if you're even a good fit to go to the school, which is, a year plus long. And so really kind of taking that model of, how can we assess these people before we, actually submit them a job offer. So we've done a lot with Skill Bridge. That's been super helpful. Getting guys in as transitioning vets. We have the data to back up, right? They fit really well here. They're not going to be running to HR when somebody drops a curse word or an off-color joke or something like that. But they've just spent however many years in the military. It's a natural transition to still continue to be in that fight and support the warfighter.
Yep.
Right, and we've done it wrong. I'll be the first to admit. So
you tend to are you hiring slow and firing fast now, or is that what you're trying to do?
Yeah. Before we've only fired 2 people at battle site, and one was an unpaid intern that was doing it for school credit. We're like, bro, we'll sign off on your paper, just don't come back. And then the other one, we just waited too long, and it had a massive impact on culture. When you're a small team, it doesn't take a whole lot of bad people to have an impact. It's not, we're not a 10,000 unit organization spread across the country. We're all here every day. That, one person skipping meetings or not showing up or not pulling their own weight on a team has a massive impact here. Like if you think of like your ODAs, right? Those bad apples didn't last long at all because that mission was too important. And not that comparing our mission to what you guys were doing by any means, but our mission is equally as important to us in the whole team, right? If somebody's not pulling their weight, that has an impact on, somebody else on the team, right? We're not worried about payroll anymore, but there was a time there that was a real risk. Like if we screw this up,
yeah, I remember that. Yeah, there were some times you were things were a
you
little.
were there probably like the height of it too.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that payroll is not an issue anymore. So you're talking a lot about purpose. So sounds like there's a big difference in what you see in terms of long-term results when the team is fueled by mission and purpose instead of just a deadline. Because I'm sure you have deadlines, but you're more about purpose, right?
We are, and I think that's so important to us. Like even like if you come to the new shop, everything's purpose built. Everything has a purpose, a function, and a reason why we do it that way, or designed it that way. And it's no different with our products. I always tell the story. The first time we debuted Craytech, our infrared cram, we did it with some PJs. They took it out on this training situation where they hid some cadavers and wrecked cars, and they had to go basically fight an OP4 force, find the cadavers, treat the cadavers, and then exfil.
So for our viewers, right? PJs that's the Air Force parajumpers. It's their version of special operations.
Yeah,
so go ahead, please.
Yeah. So there's like 250 wrecked cars. There's 4 cadavers. So they're going through searching. I was like, this is the perfect use case for Craytech, right? I'm going to mark each vehicle I search so that my buddy behind me doesn't search it, and I'm not searching the same vehicle that the guy in front of me searched. So they wrapped up that mission. They came back. They're like, hey, this is great. It saved us all this time. We used it this way. We used it that way. Your applicator sucks. I'd never carry this on a mission. It's like, all right, like, kind of sucks to be told your baby's ugly, but we saw that as an opportunity, right? Like, hey, dude, let's exchange numbers. Like, if the technology is doing what the technology should do, I can package this any way you want. Don't care. You're not going to hurt my feelings. So we work directly with those end users to develop the applicator now, to the texture, to the size, to the length, the width, even the way the screw is reverse screwed in. so you could advance it while you're shooting. It's all stuff that, a typical engineer or myself who's been out a while is not going to think about. But those guys living and breathing that mission still have all that great feedback. And that was really that aha moment that every single action we do here has to be purposeful, it has to be meaningful, and we have to have that voice of customer at the table. You and I were talking earlier, right? It's always that customer discovery and finding out, right? And what I spending my time on actually move the needle for our customers.
Yeah, so it sounds like you said earlier, right? It sucks to have your baby called ugly, but you see it as an opportunity, and that's that's a big deal, right? Because in zero fail environments, right, accountability is everything. So how are you building your culture there where people can take ownership of their mistakes so that they can improve rather than just like hiding them to avoid consequences? How'd you do that there?
Yeah, so this might be a stretch of the words, but it's what we say all the time. It's like we celebrate failure here because it's a data point for us. And no one's ever been fired here at Battle Site for making a mistake or having an experiment fail or screwing something up, whether on purpose or on accident, right? Like it's part of our risk profile. It's something we encourage. It's something we foster here and allow people to say, hey, this might work, it might not. And like, just go run the test, dude, or go build it or whatever. I think that happens. And I also think like getting our team, whether you're a program manager, whether you're an engineer, or whether you're a lab tech actually assembling these things, out into the field and letting them witness firsthand customer feedback, right? Like, let's go spend a day with our customer. They're going out to the field. We just recently did this out at Langley for a new product that's flying in the F-22s and F-35s. And we took somebody that on paper probably shouldn't have been at that trip, but for them to witness firsthand, like, this is what these guys do every single day. They can't fail. Like, people die if they fail. And we're building products for them. So we can't fail because it's going to these guys who will die if they fail, type of thing. And it sticks with people. It resonates with people.
But you see, it's funny because you're saying you can't fail, but it's okay to fail while you're trying to not fail, right?
So the end products can't fail. Those have to be 100%, right? If people are using our products, they're having a bad day. Like, they're either getting shot at, they just crash their jet. Like, our products aren't used for people like, oh, this is convenient and proves my life this way. These guys are in the shit and we can't fail. And so we do have that, the final products can't fail, but getting up to that final product, like, let's go run every extreme test. And if it fails, let's go back and tweak it for that extreme environment. We had a call with a customer earlier this morning. He's like, hey dude, what would happen if I take your product and bury it under 6 inches of snow? I'm like, I don't know. It's, summertime.
Please do it. Please go do it.
Here in Ohio, so I don't know if you'll get a return from that if it's under 6 inches of snow. I was like, we can simulate some stuff here in the lab. He's like, dude, you want to go to Finland in January and bury this under the snow? I'm like, yeah, dude, let's go. Like, no, like, we never tell a customer no, especially like, we do infrared products. The very first test we did on a product goes out in the ocean. So like, light you can see with your eyes washes out near IR light. And we tested in Okinawa, Japan during a full moon window cycle because we wanted to test in that worst possible scenario. And it was 2 weeks after the contract was awarded. So we didn't have a whole lot of time to figure it out, but
wow,
give us some C-130s and some space out in the Sea of Japan. Like, we're there.
I'm guessing it worked, or you figured it out fast.
No, absolutely not, dude. We fucking sank all of them. So this is another great story, right? It was a CDI type system. So we threw it out. I was up in the C-130. Chris, our COO, was down on the boat coordinating that end. I was coordinating the air end.
Yeah, hold on 1 second. So for people who don't understand this, right? So when an aircraft goes down, immediately there's a whole lot of people that are looking for that pilot. And if you go down in the ocean, you want to have a way so that your people can find you and the enemy can't. And so having an infrared thing, right, technical term, that the signature of and you can see from a long distance away it can be a real lifesaver. And I think that's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And So we're testing it under full moon, no clouds, and so we're flying around like 2,000 feet, which is not the current TTPs at all. But we were able to see the signature until it sank. It's like, well, this is easy. This is a mechanical problem, right? The chemistry is solid for. We can see it at the distances and everything that we wanted. And so literally we went back and like raided the team room with trash bags and all sorts of stuff to make it buoyant for the second night test. But like that's what I really feel like fuels us, right? My military career was cut short due to an injury, but it's how I feel like I'm still in the fight, supporting the men and women who are actually, putting themselves in harm's way, pulling the triggers and whatnot.
Well, good. So, and it sounds like you have your team doing, I have a favorite phrase, which is you can't achieve the impossible unless you attempt the impossible. And your people are never going to attempt to do crazy shit unless they are feeling like that's getting supported from the top. So, and you've achieved plenty of impossible stuff because you've attempted impossible stuff. So,
Absolutely. I don't think you can be like scared of trying, kind of tying it back to what we first were talking about with fear. Like, if it fails, so what? Like, the stuff you and I do nowadays, right? No one's going to die from it. We might lose some money, we might lose some time, but at the end of the day, like, getting to that result to get to that no fail product is everything we're about here.
cool. So everything Nick and I are discussing today is about high level results. If you want to move beyond theory and get to the actual mechanics we use to lead elite teams, you can join us at our community on school.com. So go to school.com, search for the Green Beret Way. We built a library of practical tools that you can use to put into practice today to see immediate results. So join our community, interact with leaders who are dealing with issues just like you are. Okay, so Nick, we have now done the heavy lifting on the mechanics of leadership, and now it's time to shift gears after hours. So Nick has been a huge supporter of Horse Soldier Bourbon from the very beginning. Actually, before it was even Horse Soldier Bourbon, back when we were still trying to get the term legendary spirits before I'd written the business plan or done anything else. And you've always been a huge supporter. You fought to have it brought into Ohio before they would do it. So I see a bottle back there. I've got one here. So
That's
please.
a special bottle signed by one.
All right. Well, I'm glad you got another one there. So yeah.
Yeah, always in stock here.
So now we're going to move into the whiskey and war stories part. And so now this is our official thing that we're quote unquote off duty. So we'll talk about some war story stuff. And all right. So here's
Buddy,
cheers.
you're more of a man than me. I've got ice in mine.
Well, I do this for a living, right? All right. So war story time. So I'm going to ask you to tell us a story, specifically the story of a moment when kind of the lights went on for you in terms of leadership. Could have been something that happened in the field, could be a tiny butterfly wings moment in the boardroom. And I think you talked a little bit about this earlier, but I'm guessing you had something even in active duty. But tell us about maybe one experience that changed your entire paradigm as a leader and set you on the path you're on today. So give you a couple minutes to think about it. I'll start off with the one that I had. And so when, I was enlisted as a Green Beret first, and then I got my commission and I knew I was going to go back in as an officer, but you can't be a lieutenant in special forces in the Green Berets, right? So, cause the lowest rank there is that captain. So you got to do something in between. And so I was in a regular Army unit for those 3.5 years when I was a second and a first lieutenant. And I'd never had to deal with like regular Army leadership before. And it's like what you said before, when you're used to being around good leaders, you don't think about it, right? It just was. And so the very first unit I went to, it was quite a shock because like I was a second lieutenant serving in a unit where everybody referred to the commander as the Dark Lord. Like when he would come down for formations, you would hear everybody in formation singing or humming the theme from Star Wars for Darth Vader. You're like dun 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 dun. Dun. Well, it wasn't so bad when I was a lieutenant because he didn't mess around with us that much. But unfortunately, I did a good enough job that they brought me up to be a primary staff officer, to be the S1 or the adjutant, while I was still a first lieutenant. And while there were actually other captains who had been brought into the squadron who everybody thought that they should be given that job to. And that was nice for my ego. But the real problem was is that the XO at the time, the major, really just hated me. And he hated me because I'm a prior service Green Beret who's been to a war. So I've got my CIB, I've got my combat patches, I got my special forces tab. I've got all this stuff. And this is before all the wars and stuff. He didn't have anything. And he just went out of his life to make my life miserable. Like what he would do is like I had my own office as the S1 because I had a big staff, about 20 people to do all the stuff, awards and all those sections that you're doing, travel. And he would come and he always expected that whenever he walked into my office that I would stand and come to the position of attention.
No, bro, you're in my office. Sorry.
Well, I mean, you just know in general, it's like, okay, right? But like he insisted upon this. And so what he would do is he would like toy with me. He would like stand outside the door like he's going to come in and he's not going to come in, right? And you're just waiting for it. And then eventually he would take a step over so then I would have to stand and come to the position of attention so he could tell me to go sit down. Like I'd never experienced any crazy shit like this before, in special forces. Cause like we don't even salute officers, under the rank of colonel when you're in the compound because everybody's on a first name basis and everybody's got to be able to. So this was just blowing my mind. And he was such a cruel dude. There was one time we did a ton of exercises. And there was one time the squadron was doing a local exercise and they didn't need me to come out there with them. So I actually got a chance to be sleeping in my bed that night. However, something happened. He calls me in the middle of the night, gets me up to come in to write up this report on something. Now, I had no idea about what went on, but I had some sort of incident report or whatever, and it had to be in a folder, and he demanded it had to be exactly this way and typed up this way. I had no idea of what actually happened, and I would have to go in and ask him what was going on. It's like 3:00 in the morning. He's sitting at his desk with his feet propped up, reading a book. Like he's literally not helping me at all, and he's just making this as hard as this dude just. And it wasn't just me though. That was the problem. Like he was. If we had the Dark Lord as the commander, this XO felt like he needed to one up it. Like literally, he made everybody's life a living hell. And at some point or another, I was just like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it back to Special Forces just from this dude. And then we got a new S3 that came in, and that's another major. And so for people aren't aware of the kind of the way it works in the military. So even though both the executive officer, the XO, and the S3, who's the operations officer, are both majors, the executive officer is still in charge, but the operations officer has such a huge staff. He's kind of autonomous, but not really. But I didn't work for the S3. I didn't work for the operations, right? I had my own staff as the S1. But I remember Major Piskel, Rich Piskel, and if you ever hear this, I still think fondly of you. This was the first time that I ever saw somebody who made such a huge difference in a really bad culture. Because at the time, everybody hated coming to work. Everybody hated going to do anything at all. It was just absolute misery. And then Major Piskel walks in and he's just like, it'll be okay, boys. And immediately he starts providing top cover, not just for his own people, but even for those of us, the other staff officers that were there as well. And even though he couldn't tell the XO not to do certain things to us or whatever, he'd find a way to come in and he'd smooth it out. And I'm still not exactly sure what he did, except that he just provided that amazing, calm presence. And he was very good, right? He was exceptionally good at his job. And so as a result, he immediately gained a whole lot of respect. But the biggest thing he did is he just provided top cover, not just for his own people, but for everybody else, so that we could start to do our jobs effectively as well, too. Because when we went to the field, right, it was the XO wasn't in charge. It was the commander, and then it was the S3 because he's running all the operations. Anyway, so I always look back to that as my first time I really saw what leadership was like. And then, even though I come from a special operations community, I have always tried to model myself then after Rich Piskel, who I thought more than anything I ever saw embodied what leadership is supposed to be. So here's the Major Piskel.
Yeah, sounds like a hell of a dude.
He ended up as a colonel, but at the time he was a major. So
Yeah, that's awesome. I think like leadership's done through actions, not words, right? And I think that's kind of my big takeaway here in that story is this guy showed up even though he wasn't in command. He took command of the situation, took care of his people, and I'm sure you guys were a better organization because he was there.
Yep. The results immediately perked up in every section, not just his, but the entire squadron. Yeah, so
that's huge. My story is going to touch on some S1 stuff and another great leader that I had the privilege of working for, Ron Shelley. So I did a pretty good job of staying out of trouble in my military career, and I was already injured. I was hiding out in Germany trying to recover. Leg wasn't healing 100% the correct way, and like the writing was on the wall. I was going to get medically retired or chaptered, whatever they called it back then. And I was the ops NCOIC, non-commissioned officer in charge. So I was number 2 in the organization under Ron Shelley. And we had this Joe. He's a 300 PT stud, which I'm a firm believer their PT score doesn't actually mean you're a good Joe. But in the eyes of the Army, that means you're a rock star, even if you're a shitbag. But he wasn't. Super good kid. He was always picking up shifts for people. So kind of how our detachment worked is you had to be E5 or above and go to some schools to be an agent traveling with the boss or doing that advanced work we talked about. We had a bunch of E4s and below. They were responsible for guarding the building and residents and like physical security type stuff. And could not ask any more from this kid. We caught a mission to New York City. This kid was originally from New York. He was sending money back every month, supporting his family, just like everything you would want in a junior enlisted dude, this guy had. So we send him on the mission, right? Like, we'll find something for you to do, right? Get your cost covered to get back to the States, basically, because you're on this TDY mission. And then we'll tack on some leave for you, and then you'll fly back. And so go visit, spend some time with your family, right? We're in Germany, so 4-day passes were great in Germany, but for this kid in this situation, like, you don't get to go home on a 4-day pass in Germany. And so that went off. The mission went flawless. Got great reviews of this kid. Trying to get him to the board so we can get him promoted and get him to, protective service schools. And there was some like pissed off E5 that we sent an E4 on a mission. And in the military, kind of you alluded to in your story, that rank is important and more important to some than others. And so they filed an IG complaint, and it turns out, so we worked at one base and at the COCOM we reported to, but we had a different branch for admin, and the shuffle of all these missions around the world, the kid's leave form never made it to S1 the way it should have. And so IG finds out, hey, this kid wasn't charged leave, wasn't on purpose, it's truly just an admin mistake. And so it's like 4 days before I'm getting out of the military, I'm getting slapped with a letter of reprimand, which, whatever, my career is over in 4 days, not the end of the world, but for whatever reason, it hit me hard. And so Shelley and I both got these letter of reprimands. It was written by like a kindergartner. There's typos and misspelled words. It's humorous looking back on it now, but at the time it like really set me off. And we wore civilian clothes in this job, so we showed up, get kicked out of the sergeant major's office. My household goods have already shipped. I have like 2 pairs of khakis and 3 polos to get me through going home. So that was a whole mess, just getting yelled at and belittled. I'm like, dude, this is my duty uniform. I don't know what to tell you. But we were driving back, and it was a pretty quiet ride. And Shelley looked over to me and said, Ripplinger, that's the cost of taking care of your people. Like, just not fazed at all. Didn't give a fuck about this letter or this ass chewing we just got. He's just like, I'll do this every day if it means we're taking care of our people and doing the right thing. And that always stuck with me. And to this day, I think like our IP is valuable and technology is valuable and all that. But at the end of the day, the real value here at Battle Site is our people. And my number one job every single day is to make sure we're taking care of and supporting our people. Kind of like the old way of the NCO, right? I care about how your family's doing. I care that your bills are getting paid. I care about, medical stressors and all of that. Really looking at the whole entire person here. and making sure we're putting them first. And if we take care of our people, they take care of their jobs, and everything else kind of just works itself out.
Oh, we can drink
Yeah.
to that. All right, finally.
Yeah.
What is something about you that nobody else knows or people that would be surprised to find out about you? Like, are you secretly an opera geek? Are you a watch nerd? Well, I know that already kind of.
Yeah. That's not.
Anime junkie? Do you write poetry on the side? What do you do when you think nobody else is watching?
So just recently, this is like a new one. I started playing guitar,
Sweet.
trying to get some thoughts and try to continue to fill that creative void of, it's not a product, like a physical, tangible product like Craytac or Coldfire or any of the other stuff we build here. But yeah, I've been spending some time on that. Fucking absolutely terrible, but it's kind of a way to connect with my youngest son. He's super musical, but also just I found it super rewarding to myself. Just
Yeah, good for the soul, isn't it?
yeah, getting words on paper. I don't know if they're any good or not, but we're gonna go find out.
Nice. Well, although it's kind of hard to be schlepping a guitar at any of these things that we go to, but it'd be nice to have you bring it at some point. So,
It's turned out to be a wildly expensive hobby due to my laziness. Like, there's one right behind me here. There's one in my bedroom. There's one in the living room.
oh, okay. Well, you know what? I mean, you can
But
afford it, right? Next time you come to Texas, you just buy a guitar and leave it there, right? So,
yeah, we should do that. Hopefully, I have something good by then.
yeah. All right. Well, we have covered a lot of ground today with Nick. If there's one thing I want you to walk away with while you're listening, is that extraordinary performance is earned, and it's earned through our choices. So we've looked a lot at today about how fear can paralyze a boardroom. It can paralyze people actually even in the military, but we also saw the alternative. We saw what happens when a leader learns to inoculate their fears and they choose to act as a circuit breaker for their team. And when you make that choice, you aren't just being tough, you're removing a maladaptive biological response that keeps most organizations stuck in a cycle of average. So Nick showed us that epic leadership is about choosing composure so your team can achieve what others believe is impossible. I'll leave you with a quote from the Green Beret Way, which fits in perfectly with Nick's book and what he wrote about, and that is this: if you're dealing with lions and your tools are whips, leashes, and cages, then you're operating out of fear. But if you're the leader of the pack, you let your lions roam free because they are operating from a shared sense of purpose. And that's fearlessness. It's also called vision. So if you're leading a team right now that feels stuck, look in the mirror. Check the signal that you're giving to your team, because if you want to achieve the extraordinary, you have to be the one who chooses to inoculate your team against the fears that's holding them back. The best way to support this show is to grab a copy of my book, The Green Beret Way, on Amazon. And if you're looking to bring this type of epic leadership training to your organization or into your life, head over to thegreenberetway.com. So lead when others can't, win when others break. I'm Rob Schaefer, and we'll see you next week.